Roger Buchanan.
Perhaps I should explain. My background is as a doctor, as a clinical scientist, and I've come to art late in life, and I've done so to try and understand art. Lifetime interest in photography, and I wanted to be able to read photographs, to put them in context, to understand. I'm also something, as you know, Sarah, of a butterfly, and so I go from subject to subject to subject. This subject has been stimulated by an interest in the environment, and I was brought up to revere people like Ansel Adams. But his view of the landscape is of a non-changing landscape, a landscape that he wanted set in permanence. It's artificial because man created a lot of what he tries to convey as being a fixed point. And so I was interested more in the work of Edward Weston, for example, who went with him, never went more than 200 meters from a road, and he took lots of images that were of things like roadside verges. I was given a book by Corey Wright, which was A Journey Through England, chocolate box, but in it were some roadside verges, which were the only things that spoke to me from within that book. And they talked about the impermanence of the roadside verge, its wild nature, within the context of the fixed that is the road. So there is an impermanence to the roadside verge, which is generally only managed for the sake of the highway user. And many roadside verges, because of their very nature, are never visited, they're never explored. They become havens for wildlife. We have a kestrel for every mile of motorway. And these are just two images of part of the A31, the journey that I took to Farnham every day. This is just south of Alresford. This is just north of Alton, coming towards Farnham. One of the things that photographers love is for everything to be level, everything to be straight lines. And roads aren't like that. Roads curve, they rise, they fall. And so these are the falls of the land. And there is a fall to your right as you look at this picture, or going uphill as you go up the carriageway. And here there's a slight rise as you head from Alton towards Farnham. I like the impermanence of this. I like the fact that the cars as they pass create this sense of movement which you see in the verges. I like the fact that there is an unseen beyond, and you're led to imagine what the road might look like seen from the other side. I was attracted by the steps here, which as you explore them appear to go nowhere. There's actually remarkably little behind this to explain why the steps were ever there, but there they are. You know that there is a superficiality to just playing with horizons, isn't there? And I want the horizon to be the correct horizon, which is perhaps... the other thing is that I spend my life in the country, and I used to spend my life in cities, in rooms, and I've become very familiar with this definition of country. But a lot of people who don't visit the country with any frequency never even bother to look at this. And I have a little bit of what I would call wonderment, which is not quite an Oxford English Dictionary word. But I can look at this and I can wonder at nature. And I want to convey some of that with the textures, the wildness, the way that these plants grow here. And they're generally left alone for a year until somebody says, the car user can't see round the corner, and they come in and flay this flat. But in the meantime, it's wild. And I like its wildness. And I want ever so slightly to convey that sense of the wild. And even here, on what is an island, a carriageway, there is here the completely unkempt and wild. When I did A-level before doing an MA, I went to see the good Mr. Power, who is now a member of Magnum. And one of the things that he said is that a single image can never be a documentary. You need more than one image. 2 images can be part of a documentary, perhaps more is better. But these 2 images are part of, in a sense, a documentary. And there is a lot that is unseen. There is, if you like, presence and absence. And the viewer can explore that within these photographs. I like the medium of photography because for me the challenge is actually to get it right in the camera. I was brought up with film, I was brought up with slides, and I use digital manipulation hardly at all. And I don't want lots of digital manipulation. I want to try and convey pretty well what the eye would see if the eye was behind me. I don't go for very wide angles. I don't go for very telephoto. I go for the eye's perception. And so these are two as I saw them. The bright greens here are the colours of spring. They're the colours of early spring, and God, we had a wet spring this year. And so it has this vibrancy to it. And some will look at this and say, well, that's the wrong green. It isn't the wrong green, it's the right green. This isn't Photoshop. So other inspiration was Jem Southam, who met a painter who went to a pool within a wood and tried over many years to paint that pool. And the painter died. Jem Southam revisited the place. He saw his easel standing there. And what he did was to chronicle the pool over the seasons. And he produced images that revealed more of the pool in winter, less of the pool in summer. And so you had this, is more less, is less more? What should you see? What is unseen? And I hope these two images ask the same sort of question of the viewer. So what is seen, what is obvious, what is fixed, what is unseen, what is not so obvious? What do you get from continuing to look at this? And if you like, the catalyst to starting this was going to the Hockney exhibition, where Hockney looked at a particular road, and one of the things that he did very effectively, and I'm not sure that I like video installations particularly, was to actually go down a road with a camera chronicling the road and its roadside. And he showed you the roadside, and he showed you in his series of images the effect of seasons. So this is a continuing project. These images will be repeated in the winter, in the spring, in the summer, to convey the other sense of movement, which is time. As a doctor, I'm interested in memory and photography. I'm quite interested in how photographs influence memory and how memory drives you to creating other images. So part of what establishes memory is repetition. And so going back and going back and going back, you see more and more, and you see the subtlety of change. And seasonal change can be dramatic. Day to day, light to light, time of day can be very different and very subtle. And all of this builds memory. And then photographs can reinforce that memory. There is a risk that at times photographs produce an aberrant memory because they may create memory that wasn't really there. And that's an interesting aspect of a risk of photography. So we can all remember 9/11, we can all remember the bombs in London, but none of us were there. And the images that we have are created by journalists, not by our own experience. So I'd like to convey my experience, but I'd also like to encourage people, because I'm an environmentalist, to go out there and get the experience for yourself. Stop on a roadside and look at the roadside. Don't just drive down the road and pass it by.